they know what to do with, but that doesn't always make life easy. Norlander spent real time with the family, the Caliparis, on Saturday night. We'll get into that next. This is the Eye on College Basketball podcast on CBS Sports Network. Welcome back. Eye on College Basketball podcast, CBS Sports Network. Incredibly, the only double-digit seed left in this NCAA tournament is John Calipari's Arkansas Razorbacks. John Cinderella in the bracket. This is his 24th appearance in the NCAA tournament. First time he's ever been a double-digit seed, and he got to the Sweet 16 by eliminating first Bill Self and then Rick Pitino. Norlander, you were there for both games in Providence. You spent time after the round of 32 victory over St. John's with John Calipari, plus his wife Ellen, plus his younger daughter Megan. What'd you take away from those conversations?
A lot. The scene was incredible. There's just so much surrounding that game, oh, by the way. And I know you touched on most of the St. John stuff, so we're going to move on from that. But just the fact that Pitino lost again to Calipari, who has now a 4-game edge over him head-to-head all time, including their time in the NBA, and the way it happened, R.J. Lewis having a bad game, Calipari doing it, just wild. And the athleticism meant a lot there for Arkansas, and team shot terribly. And at the end of the game, where it happened, I was on press row right up on the court, but, over my right shoulder, all of maybe 10, 12 feet away, were Ellen and Megan, and the cameras did catch them for about 2 or 3 seconds. I saw the clips that were shared, but they were like crying for like a good 2-3 minutes. Like, it was a very, very powerful moment. And in that moment, I kind of thought, I think I got to write the Calipari family angle and just Cal in general. And credit to them. They were wonderful to talk with. Ellen has just, as you well know, I mean, you've known her for such a long time, dating back to when you covered Memphis. She has seen everything and gone through everything. Megan actually gave me some really powerful quotes, and some of which obviously made the story. Some I wound up, she just gave me a lot. And there was at a certain point, just got to figure out what you're going to put in the story. But one thing that she did say that I didn't have in the story was what you alluded to on the previous, segment here as we were teasing this part of the show. And she said, listen, I was so fortunate to be in a position where I grew up privileged. Like, I had a lot of things, and it has been amazing. But that doesn't change the fact, she had another quote that was similar like this that I put in the story. It doesn't change the fact that it's not easy to continually and perpetually see your father mocked, everything that comes with it, criticized. Like, it just never ends. I cannot go and read, unless I'm specifically going to read about my dad and like a game he won or something. Like, I can't avoid it. And so she was the one willing to say this was vindication. She was the one that said those two have a rivalry, referring to Rick Pitino. No matter how much they deny it, it is absolutely the case there. And they also revealed that this past season has been just as stressful as anyone before it, which was new information because Calipari, as we talked about on the show a year ago when the move became public about him leaving, it had gotten very toxic on the Kentucky side, understandably so. A lot of letdowns. He and his former AD, Mitch Barnhart, were not the best of buds, to put it lightly. And you think, okay, you go to Fayetteville, you get to start over. And there were some good things about it, but 0-5 in the SEC. Calipari told me he went and bought champagne after they won their first SEC game. And I thought he was joking. He was like, no, we went and did that. Like, we needed to have some sort of celebration to indicate that we weren't going to go 0-18. And he wins the game at Kentucky when no one thought that was going to happen. And then he gets the win over Rick Pitino. It's something. I love your John Cinderella nickname. Let's stick with that for the rest of this tournament, GP. But it is, it's something to see. He's got a career. I think big picture takeaway, Parrish. He has got a career that really just does not have a parallel. He's the greatest recruiter in the history of college basketball. He's one of the greatest coaches. And as I wrote in the story, he is not put in the class and on the tier with Rick Pitino. People don't say John Calipari is one of the 3 or 4 or 5 best coaches in the history of college basketball. They say that about Rick Pitino. And yet here's Calipari booting Pitino out of the tournament. He's the only guy to ever beat Pitino 3 times in the tournament. He's got 16 Sweet 16s, tied for Izzo with the most active ever. And some of his downfalls have been of his own doing, but some of his greatest triumphs are because of how he's wired and how he wants to do stuff. I find him to be continually fascinating. He's just an incredible story subject, and I had not seen that look on his face and that kind of, satisfaction over like, wow, job's not done, but we're in the Sweet 16 after everything we were going to. It was really interesting to see, and I was very happy and lucky and fortunate and grateful to be on hand to watch Pitino and Cal one more time and talk with the family after.
And just a reminder, that game was of how this tournament can flip everything. Like for 4 months, Rick Pitino has been having the time of his life, and John Calipari has been miserable. And because of the outcome of one 40-minute game, now Rick Pitino is miserable, and John Calipari is as happy as I assume he's been in a while. And I know you said you were surprised to hear that this season has been as stressful as previous ones for the family, but that doesn't surprise me at all, because when you're 66 years old, you just got pushed out of a place you were certain you were going to retire at. And then you were fortunate enough to land the type of job where they can set you up with NIL, where you can go buy one of the best rosters and most expensive rosters in the sport. And then it gets off to such a bad start. You're 0-5 in the SEC. Your best NBA prospect is hurt at the time you think probably for the season. It gets really bad. And I bet deep down somewhere, John, I don't think would ever acknowledge this. He's not the type that would acknowledge this. I think you probably start to question yourself a little bit. I bet you start to wonder if what people are saying about you are true. I know I would. So maybe I'll just speak for myself. If I was 66 years old, the success I used to have is getting much more difficult to obtain. The place that used to treat me like a god told me to leave. And now I'm not doing so well at my new job. What if everybody's right? What if I have lost it? What if I'm not the same guy anymore? What if this has passed me by? A strong-minded person maybe doesn't let that seep in, but I don't know how you don't let it get in there somewhere. And so to stay in it, though, and keep fighting and get back to this place is remarkable. I know John Calipari is not everybody's favorite person, but I like great stories wherever they are. And I loved that you went and found Ellen and found Megan and allowed them to have voices in that column. I thought they provided you with great material, and then you knocked it out of the park. Like you said, I've known Ellen for 25 years. Been in her home. We're not best friends. We didn't ever go to Starbucks and sit down and have coffee and talk for 2 hours, but always cordial when we see each other. I've known Megan since she's a little girl, like literally a little girl. And to see her and Aaron and Bradley, all of them, grow up to be just impressive young people. It's been fun watching that family, grow up. And I understood every word Megan said. Most of us don't have famous fathers. We don't know what that's like. And I guess when it's good, it's really good. You're on private planes and you're courtside at everything. And when it's good, it's good. But when it gets bad, I just don't think most of us understand what that's like, to hear people in your community very loudly scream that your father stinks, that your father doesn't deserve his job, that your father is overpaid. Most of us never have to hear that, whether our fathers fit any of those categories or not. It's just not something people talk about. But when you're a basketball coach, particularly that basketball coach, it can get really nasty. Real quick, I'll tell you a story. I went and saw Tom Crean and Joni Crean when they were still at Indiana. And Joni told me a story one time. Their daughter was in school at Indiana. This was probably 2 years before Tom actually got pushed out of Indiana. So he's still the coach. And their daughter was in class at Indiana, and the professor walks in, big auditorium type class, and says, hey, just got an announcement to make for anybody who hadn't been following it, checked your phones. But Tom Crean has been fired as Indiana's basketball coach. And the entire class was cheered, woohoo, woo. It was April 1st. The professor said, April Fools, ha, ha, ha. Mm-hmm. Well, there's Tom Crean's daughter sitting there having to experience that. What does that do to somebody? So, these problems, they're bigger problems in the world. I got it. It's always hard to get people to feel sorry for multimillionaires. But that family has had I bet it hadn't been fun the past few years, being a part of the Calipari family. And to see them be able to share that moment. I know John didn't tear up the way his wife and daughter did, but I bet he felt a similar way.
Yeah. And I happened to be sitting before we go to break here. I was sitting watching. First of all, I watched DJ Wagner. He's got a great story in and of itself, and it was awesome to see him. He was on. I saw him walk into the bus. He was like the last guy out of the building, and he was on cloud nine. It was awesome to see DJ do what he was able to do there. But Calipari, first made eyes with his wife and daughter, and then they come on the court, and just downright beaming. And they just the emotion overcome, and the CBS cameras catching that. There was a lot going on there. Before we go to break, GP, I give them a chance here, and we're going to preview more Sweet 16 stuff Tuesday, and we're going to have a typical Wednesday show as well. So we have plenty of time, but just real quick, I do give them a chance against Texas Tech, and we wait and see. Adu Thero, I don't think it was never really truly on the table. He would play this first weekend, but if he can return, don't forget about the fact that they have done this. Boogie Fland hasn't really been an impactful player. He's back, but he has after the wrist injury, and no Thero. Texas Tech is really good, but man, that's going to be must-watch stuff. That is a late tip, by the way, on Thursday on TBS.
Of course you give him a chance. And I'm glad you mentioned Adu being sidelined, because that's another way to frame this. If you just be like SEC school, John Calipari in the Sweet 16, whatever. Think of it this way. Take John out of it. It's a 10 seed missing its leading scorer. That's what's happened. It's a 10 seed missing its leading score, and it's in the Sweet 16. It's an awesome story, and obviously you've got to give them a chance. Keep in mind, the roster was preseason 16 in the AP poll. That's how good the roster was viewed by AP voters. They were 16th in the preseason AP poll. St. John's, by the way, unranked in the preseason AP poll. So Arkansas always had a roster that suggested this type of stuff is possible. It just took them a while to get to this place. But I'll keep this simple, and then we'll move on. If you've already eliminated, and I know Kansas never really looked like the preseason number one team, but still what I'm saying is true. If you've already eliminated the preseason number one team and the outright Big East champion, you're not worried about anybody else in front of you. It doesn't mean they'll win another game. In fact, I would predict they probably won't. But in that locker room, do the Arkansas players believe that this is over now? No. I guarantee you they think they can win at least a couple of more games and get to a Final Four, which would obviously be an incredible script flip for John Calipari in that staff. When we come back, we'll turn our attention to the Big Ten. They got 4 teams in the Sweet 16, Michigan, Michigan State, Maryland, Purdue. Is this the year they can snap that long, ugly streak